The spoon
We
caught
have
the
endured
last
so
rays of
much.
Texas sunlight,
We can
throwing
master
fractured
now
rainbows across
for
the
the
wooden
children.
floor. Anna Bauer held it in her palm, feeling its weight, its history, its impossible presence in this place so far from home. Sterling silver,
The night is
engraved
long.
with her family
It
crest.
feels endless.
The only thing she had managed to hide when they came for her father in the autumn of 1941. She was 17 years old then, 21 now. And the spoon, this small piece of metal shaped by craftsmen in Munich a century ago, had traveled with her from New York to Boston to Chicago, and finally here to a place called Camp Swift in the heart of Central Texas. Outside her window, mesquite trees cast long shadows across red dirt roads. The air smelled of dust and cedar and something else she could not name. Freedom, perhaps, or its opposite. She was not sure anymore which was which. A knock on the door made her close her fingers around the spoon, hiding it instinctively. 4 years of living as an enemy alien had taught her to hide everything of value. Trust no one. Expect the worst. The worst had a way of arriving when you least expected it. Miss Bauer, the voice was young male American. Dinner bell rang 5 minutes ago. You coming? Anna said nothing. She pressed her back against the wall and waited for the door to burst open for hands to grab her for the nightmare that German radio had promised would come. Instead, footsteps retreated down the hallway. Fading. Gone. She waited another 10 minutes before moving. Outside, the Texas evening was painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Through her window, she could see other women emerging from their cottages, moving toward the dining hall with the shuffling gait of people who had forgotten how to hurry. Her mother was among them, Margaret Bauer, 53 years old, back straight, despite everything walking as if she were entering a concert hall in Berlin rather than a mess hall in Texas. Beside her walked on his younger sister Clara, just 14, still childlike in her movements, still believing that this was temporary, that father would come for them soon, that the world would return to making sense. Anna tucked the silver spoon into her pocket and followed. 3 weeks earlier, the train had rattled through darkness for 6 days, carrying 62 women and children west from the internment facility in Boston. No one told them where they were going. No one explained why they were being moved. The guards simply appeared one morning, ordered them to pack, and loaded them onto cars that had once carried freight, not people. Anna remembered every moment of that journey, the way her mother had sat rigid on the wooden bench, hands folded in her lap, face revealing nothing. The way Clara had cried the first night until there were no tears left. The way the other women had whispered prayers and curses, and memories of lives that seemed to belong to someone else. Through the small window, America had passed like a fever dream. Mountains and rivers, endless plains, cities that glowed at night with more lights than Anna had seen in 4 years. All of it foreign, all of it belonging to the enemy. Except they were the enemy now. She had to remember that. The propaganda had been explicit. German women captured by Americans faced horrors too terrible to name. Better to die by your own hand than endure what was coming. Better to protect your children through any means necessary than let them fall into the hands of men who had no concept of honor or restraint. Anna's mother had prepared. In her coat pocket, sewn into the lining where no one would find it, was a vial of arsenic, enough to kill all 3 of them if the moment came. The train had arrived at Camp Swift on a Tuesday morning in February 1946. The war had been over for 9 months, but no one seemed to know what to do with the thousands of German civilians still held in American camps. Send them back to a Germany that no longer existed, keep them indefinitely in a country that did not want them. So they waited, and waited, and waited. When the canvas flap had been pulled back and Anna stepped down from the train car, she expected barbed wire and guard towers, dogs and guns, and the architecture of imprisonment she had seen in Boston. What she saw instead made her dizzy with confusion. The camp sat on rolling hills dotted with live oak trees. The buildings were low and white, arranged in neat rows with pathways between them. There was a school building with a playground, attached swings moving gently in the morning breeze. There was a garden already planted with winter vegetables, their green shoots bright against dark soil. And there were men. American soldiers, yes, but also civilians. Mexican workers tending the grounds. A few older men who might have been administrators or doctors or guards. None of them were pointing weapons. None of them were shouting. "Is this another camp?" Clara whispered in German. "Or something else?" "It is a trap," their mother said flatly. "They want us calm before they strike." But hours passed and nothing struck. They were assigned to a cottage, 2 bedrooms, and a kitchen and a bathroom with running water. Real beds with mattresses and pillows. Windows that opened and closed. A lock on the door that worked from the inside. Anna walked through the cottage like someone in a dream, touching surfaces to confirm they were real. The kitchen had a stove and icebox pots and pans hanging from hooks. The bathroom had a tub deep enough to submerge in soap that smelled of lavender towels that were clean and soft. "This is how they confuse us," Margaret said. She was checking every corner, every closet, looking for cameras or microphones or whatever mechanism would spring the trap. Comfort before cruelty. It makes the fall harder. That first night they did not sleep. They sat together in the living room, listening to footsteps outside, waiting for the knock that would signal the end of pretense. The knock never came. Instead, morning arrived with birdsong and sunlight and the smell of something cooking. Bacon. Real bacon, the scent so strong and unexpected that Anna felt tears spring to her eyes before she understood why. It was the smell of before the war, before the FBI took their father, before the world split into us and them safe and dangerous home in exile. The dining hall was larger than she expected, with long tables arranged cafeteria style and a kitchen at one end that seemed to generate more noise and aroma than any kitchen had a right to. Steam rose from pots. Metal clanged against metal. Voices called out in English and Spanish, mixing together in a rhythm that felt almost musical. The 62 women and children stood frozen just inside the door, staring at what waited for them. Breakfast. Not prison food, not the thin porridge and stale bread they had survived on in Boston, but an American feast that belonged in a different universe entirely. There were eggs, scrambled and fried and poached, glistening with butter. There was bacon, strips of it, piled high on metal trays, crisped to perfection. There were pancakes stacked like architecture syrup, pooling in golden lakes. There was fresh bread, still warm, and real butter to spread on it. There was coffee, actual coffee, its aroma alone enough to make grown women weep. And there were pastries. Danish and croissants and something that looked like German strudel, but could not possibly be German strudel, because how would they have German strudel in the middle of Texas? No one moved. 62 people stood in absolute silence, staring at abundance that violated everything they had been taught to expect. From the kitchen emerged a man who looked like he had been built from the Texas landscape itself. Broad and solid skin, weathered dark by decades of sun hair, silver white, and cropped close to his skull. He wore an apron over civilian clothes and carried himself with the ease of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. "Good morning, ladies," he said in English, then repeated it in halting German that made several of the children giggle despite themselves. "Guten Morgen, meine Damen." He gestured toward the buffet with both hands, a welcoming gesture that seemed to encompass not just the food, but the entire building, perhaps the entire camp. "My name is Marcus Webb, but everyone calls me Chief. Used to run a diner in Austin before the war. Now I run this kitchen." He picked up a plate and began filling it with deliberate slowness, narrating each item. Eggs. Very good eggs from chickens right here on the grounds. Bacon from local hogs. Pancakes made this morning. Coffee that's strong enough to wake the dead. He sat down at a nearby table and began to eat, making small sounds of satisfaction as he chewed. After a moment, he looked up at the frozen crowd. "I know what they told you," he said quietly. "I know what you expected, but I promise you on my mother's grave, which is just 30 miles from here in a little cemetery outside Round Rock, nobody in this camp is going to hurt you. We are just going to feed you and house you until somebody smarter than me figures out what to do with all of us." Still no one moved. Chief sighed and tried a different approach. "You see that little girl there?" He pointed to Clara, who shrank behind her mother. "How old are you, sweetheart?" Clara did not answer, could not answer. Fear had stolen her voice. "She is 14, Anna heard herself say. The words came out in English, clear and precise. It was the first time she had spoken to an American in 4 years. Chief's eyebrows rose. "You speak English." "I was educated in America, before." "Before," Chief repeated, nodding. "Yeah, lots of befores going around these days." He looked at Clara again. "When I was 14, I could eat my weight in pancakes. Still can, actually, but the doctor says I should not." He patted his considerable belly. Would you like to try some young lady? I make them special. Secret ingredient. Clara looked up at her mother, seeking permission. Margaret's face was stone, but Anna saw something else. She saw the way Clara's eyes kept darting to the food. She saw her sister's hands trembling with hunger and hope, and the terrible tension between what she wanted and what she feared. What is the secret ingredient? Anna asked. Chief grinned. Now, if I told you, it would not be secret, would it? But I can tell you this. My grandmother was from Bavaria, came to Texas in 1875 with nothing but her recipes and her determination. These pancakes are made the way she made them for 60 years. Bavaria, the word hung in the air like a bridge between worlds. Your grandmother was German, Margaret spoke for the first time, her English heavily accented but comprehensible. German as they come. Spoke it her whole life, taught it to her children and grandchildren. Even taught me a few phrases, though I massacre them pretty good. Chief's expression softened. She would have liked you ladies. She always said the most important thing in life was feeding people properly. Did not matter who they were or where they came from. Hungry is hungry. He stood up, brushed crumbs from his apron, and walked back toward the kitchen. At the door he turned. Food is getting cold. That would disappoint my grandmother. And disappointing grandmothers is a sin in any language. And then he was gone, leaving them alone with their fear and the impossible abundance before them. It was Clara who broke first. Or perhaps it was not breaking, but something braver. She stepped forward, picked up a plate with trembling hands, and moved toward the pancakes. Her mother reached for her, but Anna caught Margaret's wrist. Let her eat, Anna whispered. Clara loaded her plate with the focused intensity of someone who had been hungry for a very long time. Pancakes and bacon and eggs and bread. She carried it to a table, sat down, and began to eat. The sound she made after the first bite was something between a tip and a laugh, were pleasure mixed with disbelief. She looked back at her mother and sister, her face transformed. It tastes like Christmas, she said in German. It tastes like before. That was all it took. The dam broke. Children rushed forward, then mothers, then grandmothers. Within minutes, the buffet was surrounded by women loading plates with shaking hands, tears streaming down their faces, eating as if they could consume not just food, but proof that the world might contain kindness after all. Anna filled a plate for her mother, then one for herself. She sat down beside Margaret and watched her mother's face as she took the first bite of bacon. Margaret chewed slowly, mechanically, then stopped, then chewed again more deliberately. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Marta used to make bacon like this, she whispered. Marta had been their cook in Munich before the war, before everything. On Sunday mornings when your father was home. I remember, Anna said. They ate in silence, surrounded by the sounds of other women eating and crying, and slowly, tentatively beginning to believe that perhaps this morning would not end in violence after all. From the kitchen, Anna could hear Chief singing something in Spanish, his voice rough but joyful. The smell of coffee and cinnamon and hope filled the air. It was not enough. One meal could not erase 4 years of fear, but it was a start. That afternoon, they were given a tour of the camp. The guide was a young soldier, maybe 25, with dark hair and darker eyes, and a shy smile that made him look even younger. He introduced himself as Private Daniel Reyes, third-generation Texan, first in his family to join the Army. My abuelo, my grandfather, he came from Mexico in 1890, Reyes said as they walked. His English was accented with the musical lilt of Spanish, nothing like the harsh propaganda voices Anna had heard on German radio. Worked on ranches all his life. Saved enough money to buy a small piece of land near San Antonio. Raised cattle and children and dreams. He led them past the school building, where a teacher was already unpacking books and chalk. Past the medical clinic, where a nurse with red hair and freckles waved cheerfully. Past the recreation hall, where someone had set up a piano and left sheet music on the stand. You can play if you want, Reyes said, noticing Anna's gaze. Music is free here, no rules against it. Anna stopped walking. Why are you doing this? Reyes turned, confusion evident on his face. Doing what? Being kind, showing us around, acting as if we are guests instead of prisoners. The soldier was quiet for a moment, thinking. When he spoke, his voice was serious. My grandfather told me something when I was little. He said the measure of a man is not how he treats his friends, but how he treats those who cannot fight back. I think that goes for countries too. He met Anna's eyes. You ladies did not start this war. You are just caught in it, same as everyone else. Treating you with respect that does not cost us anything. And maybe, just maybe, it proves that we are who we say we are. And who is that? Americans, Reyes said simply. People who believe in dignity and fairness, in second chances. At least that is what we are supposed to be. They continued walking. Clara ran ahead with some of the other children drawn by the swings in the playground. Margaret followed at a distance, watching everything with the wary gaze of someone who had learned not to trust surfaces. But Anna found herself walking beside Reyes, asking questions, listening to answers, and slowly beginning to understand that perhaps not everything she had been taught about America was true. That night, back in their cottage, Margaret sat at the small kitchen table and stared at the vial of arsenic in her hands. We should get rid of it, Anna said quietly. Not yet. Mother, when they gave us food and shelter and freedom to walk around, what more proof do you need? Proof that it lasts. Margaret's voice was hard. Proof that this is not just elaborate theater before the real show begins. Anna wanted to argue, but she understood. Her mother had lived through the First War, had seen civilization collapse and reform and collapse again. Optimism was a luxury that experience had taught her to reject. Instead, Anna reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver spoon. She placed it on the table between them. Do you remember when grandmother gave me this? Margaret's expression softened fractionally. Your confirmation. She said every young woman should have something beautiful to remind her she was loved. She said something else too. She said silver does not tarnish if you use it, only if you hide it away. Anna touched the spoon's smooth surface. I have been hiding this for 4 years, hiding myself. Maybe it is time to stop. Her mother looked at the spoon, then at the vial of poison, then back at the spoon. 2 objects, 2 possibilities, 2 futures. Margaret closed her fingers around the arsenic, but did not put it away. 1 more week, she said. Give me 1 more week to be certain. Anna nodded. It was more than she had expected. Progress came slowly, like spring arriving in small increments rather than grand announcements. That week would bring revelations neither of them anticipated. It would bring a letter that changed everything. It would bring a storm and a piano, and a choice that could not be unmade. But that night in their cottage, with its real beds and running water, and locks that worked from the inside, Anna Bauer allowed herself something she had not felt in 4 years. Hope. Just a little. Just enough to sleep without nightmares. Outside Texas, stars burned in a sky so vast, it seemed to swallow all boundaries between nations and people in the divisions men create when they forget that darkness looks the same from every direction. And in the kitchen of the dining hall, Chief Webb was preparing dough for tomorrow's bread, singing his grandmother's songs and believing that food could heal what politics had broken. The silver spoon caught the moonlight and held it proof that beautiful things survive even when everything else falls apart. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, carried by Private Reyes with the careful reverence of someone delivering sacred cargo. Anna was in the garden when he found her kneeling between rows of tomatoes that were just beginning to show their first green fruit. Miss Bauer, he said, slightly out of breath. From the Red Cross. It came through the mail routing system. Took 4 months, apparently. Anna stood slowly wiping soil from her hands onto her skirt. The envelope was thin, almost translucent, covered with stamps and official markings. The handwriting on the front made her chest tighten. Her father's. She took it with trembling fingers and walked to a bench hidden behind the tool shed. There, away from watching eyes, she tore it open and began to read. My dearest Anna, the letter began. I am writing from Camp Kennedy in Texas, not far from San Antonio. I am alive and well, though missing you and your mother and Clara, with an ache that grows rather than diminishes with time. I have been here since they transferred me from the facility in North Dakota 2 months ago. The conditions are adequate, the treatment fair, though I remain in what they call protective custody for reasons no one bothers to explain to a middle-aged diplomat who poses no threat to anyone. But that is not why I write. I write because I need you to understand something important, something I wish I had understood years ago before any of this began. Anna, I know what the broadcast from Berlin told us about America. I believed them too at first. How could I not? They came from our own people, our own government voices we had trusted our entire lives. They were lies, not exaggerations or propaganda spun from partial truths, but complete fabrications designed to make us fear the very people who might have helped us. The Americans are not perfect. They have their own sins, their own failures, their own capacity for cruelty. But they are not what we were told. The men who guard me here are farmers and shopkeepers in uniform. They treat me with a courtesy I did not expect and do not deserve given what our nation did. I am ashamed, Anna. Ashamed that I served a government that committed atrocities beyond comprehension. Ashamed that I did not see it happening or chose not to see. Ashamed that my silence, however small, contributed to the machinery of death. The photographs from the camps have reached us here. Dachau, Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen. I cannot describe what I saw in those images. I will not burden you with details that would steal your sleep as they have stolen mine. But I must tell you this, we were the monsters, not the Americans. Us. If you are reading this, you are somewhere in America, perhaps in conditions similar to mine. I pray you are safe. I pray you are being treated well. And I beg you to do something I failed to do for too long. Open your eyes. Trust what you see, not what you were told. The men guarding you are not demons. They are someone's sons and brothers doing a job in a war they did not start. Give them a chance to prove who they really are. And perhaps in doing so, you will discover who you really are, freed from the lies that shaped us both. I love you. I will see you again when this madness ends. Until then, be brave, be kind, be better than I was. Your father, Heinrich. Anna read the letter 3 times. Each reading revealed new layers of meaning, new depths of pain and hope, and the complicated grace of a man confronting his own failures. She pressed the paper against her chest and let herself cry. Not the silent tears she had learned in internment, but deep sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for her father alone in his camp, carrying the weight of a nation's sins. She cried for the victims whose names she would never know. She cried for the girl she had been in Munich, innocent and ignorant, believing that the world made sense. And she cried with relief. Her father was alive, broken perhaps, but alive and trying to be better. When the tears stopped, Anna folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her pocket beside the silver spoon. 2 pieces of her past, 2 reminders of who she had been and who she might become. She found her mother in their cottage mending a dress by the window light. Margaret looked up as Anna entered, immediately sensing something had changed. From father, Anna said simply and handed her the letter. Margaret read in silence, her face revealing nothing. But Anna saw her hands tighten on the paper, saw the way her breathing changed, saw the moment when the words hit home. When she finished, Margaret folded the letter with precise movements and returned it to Anna. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she stood and walked to her bedroom and returned with the vial of arsenic. She went to the kitchen sink, uncapped the vial, and poured its contents down the drain. The powder dissolved in water and disappeared, carrying with it the death that had lived in Margaret's pocket for 6 months. Your father is right, she said quietly. We have been so afraid of monsters that we became blind to men. Anna felt something release in her chest, a tension she had carried so long it had become part of her skeleton. What changed your mind? This morning, Chief Webb asked me if I would teach him to make sauerbraten. He said his grandmother's recipe was lost and he wanted to learn the proper way. Margaret's voice was steady but soft. A man planning to harm us would not care about recipes, would not want to learn, would not see us as having anything valuable to offer except our fear. She turned on the faucet, washing away the last traces of poison. I have spent 6 months preparing to kill my own children rather than let strangers hurt them. But the only person hurting them was me, keeping them afraid, keeping them from living. Anna embraced her mother, feeling the older woman's arms come around her in return, holding tight as if afraid to let go. They stood like that for a long time, 2 women learning to trust the world again, one small decision at a time. That evening brought the storm. Texas weather moved fast in spring, transforming blue skies into roiling darkness within minutes. The wind arrived first, bending trees and rattling windows, carrying the smell of rain and ozone. Then came thunder so deep it seemed to rise from the earth itself. Lightning split the sky in jagged white lines, illuminating the camp in brief, stark flashes. And then the lights went out. Anna sat up in bed, heart pounding in the sudden darkness. Beside her, she heard Clara's frightened breathing. From the other room came their mother's voice, calm but alert. Anna, stay where you are. Clara, come to me. They gathered in the living room, three shadows in darkness, punctuated by lightning. Outside, the storm raged with a violence that seemed almost personal, as if the sky itself had declared war on the ground below. "This is when they come," Margaret said, old habits dying hard, "in the chaos, when no one can see." But even as she spoke, Anna heard something else. Not footsteps approaching their cottage, but voices in the distance. American voices shouting to be heard over the storm. "Get that generator moving. Captain wants power to the family section first." "Where's the fuel? Got it? Come on, help me with this cable." Anna moved to the window, pressing her face against the glass. Through the rain, she could see lights moving, flashlights held by soldiers who were dragging something heavy through the mud. A generator, its engine roaring to life as they worked. She watched them struggle in the downpour, watched them slip and fall and get up again, watched them refuse to give up despite the weather and the darkness and the sheer difficulty of what they were attempting. They were bringing light. In the middle of a storm, in the middle of the night, American soldiers were working to ensure that German women would not have to sit in fear and darkness. "Mother," Anna called, "come look." Margaret joined her at the window. Together, they watched as the generator sputtered, caught, and roared into steady operation. Lights flickered, then held. The cottage blazed with electricity pushing back the darkness. Through the window, Anna saw Private Reyes looking up at the buildings, checking to make sure the power had reached everyone. His uniform was soaked, his face streaked with mud, but he was smiling. "They could have waited until morning," Anna whispered. "No one would have blamed them." "But they did not wait," Margaret replied, and in her voice was something Anna had not heard in years: wonder. The storm continued for another hour, but the lights stayed on. The generator hummed its mechanical song, proof that even in chaos, some people chose to bring order. That even when no one was watching, some men chose decency over indifference. When morning came, Anna found Chief Webb in the kitchen, preparing breakfast as if he had not spent half the night in a storm. She stood in the doorway watching him work, waiting for him to notice her. "Miss Bauer," he said without turning around. "You are up early. Coffee? Please." Anna accepted the cup he poured, wrapping her hands around its warmth. "I wanted to thank you for the generator, for last night." Chief shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Just doing what needed doing. Could not have you ladies sitting in the dark scared out of your minds. Would not be right. In Boston, when the power went out, we sat in darkness for 3 days. Well," Chief cracked eggs into a bowl with practiced efficiency. "This is not Boston." "No," Anna agreed, "it is not." She sipped her coffee, gathering courage for what she wanted to say next. "My mother would like to teach you to make sauerbraten, if the offer still stands." Chief's face lit up like sunrise. "Still stands. Lady, I have been thinking about that offer all week. Been driving myself crazy trying to remember the spices my grandmother used. My mother knows all the old recipes. Her mother taught her, who learned from her mother. Back 3 generations at least. Then I would be honored to learn." Chief began whisking the eggs with vigorous strokes. "Tell your mama that anytime she wants to use this kitchen, it is hers. Mi cocina es su cocina. My kitchen is her kitchen." Anna smiled. "I will tell her." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Chief, why are you really doing this? The food, the kindness, everything. You could give us much less and still meet whatever military guidelines exist." Chief stopped whisking. He set down the bowl and looked at Anna with eyes that had seen more than his easy manner suggested. "My grandmother came to Texas with nothing," he said slowly. "Could not speak English, could not read or write, was treated like dirt by people who thought being born here made them better than someone who chose to come here." He picked up the whisk again, but did not resume working. "But there were good people too, people who gave her work and taught her English and treated her like she mattered. Those people saved her life, made it possible for her to build something, to raise children who raise children, to create a family that belongs here now. So this is repayment. This is paying forward," Chief corrected. "You ladies are scared and lost and far from home through no fault of your own. Maybe one of you has a granddaughter who will remember that Americans were kind when they could have been cruel. Maybe that memory will matter someday. Maybe it will make her kinder to someone else who needs it." He met Anna's eyes. "Or maybe it will not matter at all. Maybe you will all go home and forget this place, and I will just be a fat cook who made too many pancakes. But either way, I will know I treated people the way I wish the world had treated my grandmother." Anna felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate but sincere. "No thanks needed. Just eat the food and let your mama teach me her secrets." The cooking lessons began the next day. Margaret and Chief spent hours in the kitchen communicating in broken English, in hand gestures, in the universal language of people who understand that food is love made visible. Anna would find them there in the afternoons, her mother's hands guiding Chiefs as he learned to roll cabbage leaves or knead spitzel dough or judge when the sauce had reduced enough. They laughed together, these two people from different worlds, united by recipes and loss and the simple pleasure of creation. Other women joined them. Frau Schmidt, who had been a baker in Hamburg, taught Chief the secrets of perfect rye bread. Frau Muller demonstrated how to make proper schnitzel, the meat pounded thin and the coating crisp. Even shy Frau Hoffmann, who rarely spoke, shared her mother's recipe for apple cake. That made Chief close his eyes in rapture at the first bite. The kitchen became a sanctuary, a place where nationality mattered less than technique, where history dissolved in flour and butter, where healing happened through the simple act of feeding one another. Anna found her own sanctuary in the garden. Private Reyes had expanded the vegetable plots, adding rows of peppers and squash and herbs that reminded him of his grandfather's farm. They worked side by side most afternoons, their conversations ranging from farming techniques to family stories to the uncertain future that awaited when the war's loose ends were finally tied. "What will you do?" Reyes asked one day as they staked tomato plants. "When they let you go home?" Anna paused, trowel in hand. "I do not know if we have a home to return to. Munich was heavily bombed. Our house may not exist anymore. So you might stay here in America." "I do not know." Anna tamped soil around a plant's base. "Part of me wants to. Part of me feels I should return, help rebuild, bear witness to what happened. Both are honorable choices." "Are they?" Anna sat back on her heels, looking at the young soldier. "Or is staying here running away from responsibility?" Reyes was quiet for a moment, thinking. "My grandfather left Mexico during a revolution. People said he was running away, abandoning his country when it needed him. But he said he was choosing life over death, choosing to build something new instead of dying for something that was already gone. Do you think he made the right choice?" "I think he made the choice that let me exist, so I cannot regret it." Reyes smiled. "Maybe there is no right choice. Maybe there is just a choice that lets you sleep at night." That night, Anna lay awake thinking about choices and consequences and the weight of history on individual lives. Through the window, she could hear the generator humming its steady rhythm, a reminder that even darkness could be defeated by determined hands. The piano arrived on a Tuesday, donated by a church in Austin. It was old and slightly out of tune, but to Anna it might as well have been a Steinway fresh from the factory. She had not touched a piano in 4 years. She found it in the recreation hall, sitting against the far wall like an invitation. Her hands trembled as she lifted the fall board, revealing keys that gleamed ivory and black in the afternoon light. She sat on the bench, positioned her fingers, and played the first notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The sound filled the empty hall, achingly beautiful despite the piano's imperfections. She had learned this piece as a child in Munich, had played it at her confirmation, had believed she would play it at her wedding someday. The music poured out of her, carrying 4 years of grief and fear and longing. She played without stopping, moving through the entire first movement, her fingers remembering what her mind had tried to forget. When the last note faded, she heard applause. Startled, she turned to find a dozen women standing in the doorway. Her mother, Clara, Frau Schmidt, and Frau Muller, and others she knew only by sight. And behind them, several American soldiers, including Chief Webb and Private Reyes. "That was beautiful," Reyes said quietly. Anna felt heat rise in her cheeks. "The piano is old and young, out of tune." "The piano is perfect," her mother said, and there was pride in her voice. "Play something else." So Anna played. She played Schubert and Chopin and Mozart. She played German folk songs and American standards she had learned at parties in New York before the war. She played until her fingers ached and the light through the windows turned gold with approaching evening. And as she played, something shifted. The women began to sing along to the folk songs, their voices tentative at first, then growing stronger. Chief hummed harmony to songs he recognized. Clara sat beside Anna on the bench, watching her sister's hands move across the keys with an expression of joy that had been absent for too long. The music built bridges that words could not construct. It reminded everyone in that room that beauty survived even when everything else fell apart. That humanity persisted despite the best efforts of war and hatred and fear to extinguish it. When Anna finally stopped playing, her hands cramping, the room remained silent for a long moment. Then Chief Webb cleared his throat. "Miss Bauer, would you consider playing at dinner sometimes? Not every night, just when the mood strikes you. I think folks would appreciate it." Anna looked at her mother, who nodded. "I would be honored." And so a new ritual began. Several evenings a week, Anna would play piano during dinner. The dining hall would fill with music and conversation and the sounds of people learning to live again rather than simply survive. It was during one of these dinners that the announcement came. Captain Morrison stood at the front of the hall waiting for quiet. He was older than most of the soldiers, perhaps 50, with silver hair and the bearing of someone who had seen combat and carried its weight with dignity. "Ladies, I have news from Washington. The repatriation process has been finalized. Beginning next month, ships will be departing from various ports returning German civilians to Europe." A murmur ran through the room. Anna felt her mother's hand find hers under the table. "However," the captain continued, "there is an alternative. The State Department has created a program for those who wish to remain in the United States. You would need to apply for residency, undergo background checks, and demonstrate means of support. But it is possible to stay if that is your choice." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "You have 6 weeks to decide. My office will have the necessary paperwork, so for those interested in the residency program. There is no pressure either way. Both choices are honorable." The room erupted in conversation, women talking over each other in German and English, voices rising with hope and fear, and the overwhelming weight of a decision that would define the rest of their lives. Anna sat frozen, her mind unable to process the magnitude of what she had just heard. A choice. They were being given an actual choice. "What will we do?" Clara asked, looking between her mother and sister. Margaret's face was unreadable. "We will discuss it as a family, not here, at home." That night, the three Bauer women sat around their small kitchen table. The silver spoon lay in the center, catching lamplight, a talisman of their past, waiting to learn if it had a future in this country. "Father is still in his camp," Margaret said. "We do not know when he will be released or what condition Germany will be in when we return." "If we return," Anna said quietly, "you want to stay?" It was not a question. "I think I might." Anna chose her words carefully. "Not because I want to abandon Germany, but because I want to be somewhere that I can build something new. Somewhere that does not carry the weight of what we did. Running away will not erase that weight." "I know," Anna met her mother's eyes. "But maybe staying here will let me use that weight differently. Remember it. Write about it. Teach others so it never happens again." Clara spoke up, her young voice surprisingly firm. "I want to stay. I want to go to American school and have American friends and not be the German girl everyone whispers about." Margaret looked at her daughters, these children who had become women in exile, who had learned things no one their age should have to learn. "And what about your father?" "Father told me to trust what I see," Anna said. "He told me to be brave and kind and better than he was. I think staying here is how I do that. He also said we would see each other again. We will. When he is released, he can join us here. Or we can visit him. But Mother, you saw the photographs from the camps. You know what our country became. Do you really want to return to that, to rebuild on foundations made of bones?" Margaret was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was tired. "I am 53 years old, too old to start over in a new country with a new language and new ways." "You are starting over already," Anna pointed out. "You are teaching Chief to cook. You are making friends. You are learning English. The only question is whether you do it temporarily or permanently." "It is not the same." "Why not?" Margaret had no answer. Or rather, she had many answers, but none that could stand against the simple truth her daughter had spoken. They talked into the night, weighing options and consequences in the terrifying freedom of choice. By the time the sun rose, they had not reached a decision, but they had reached understanding. Whatever they chose, they would choose together. And whatever happened next, they would face it not as victims, but as women who had survived and would continue surviving one small act of courage at a time. The silver spoon remained on the table waiting. The decision came not in a moment of revelation, but in gradual accumulation like sediment building into stone. Anna watched her mother over the following weeks, cataloging small changes that added up to transformation. Margaret no longer checked the locks on their cottage door 3 times before bed. She smiled when Chief Webb made jokes in his terrible German. She had started learning to read English using Clara's school books, moving her lips silently as she worked through sentences about Dick and Jane and Spot. One afternoon, Anna found her mother sitting on the cottage porch, writing a letter to Heinrich. The page was covered in Margaretta's careful script, German words flowing across American paper. "What are you telling him?" Anna asked. Margaret did not look up. "That we are staying, that he should join us when they release him. That Texas is not Munich, but it is not hell either." Anna sat down beside her mother, feeling something settle in her chest. Relief, perhaps, or simply the end of uncertainty. "When did you decide?" "I did not decide," Margaret said. "I simply stopped fighting what was already happening." She set down her pen and looked at Anna. "You were right about the weight. Germany will always be part of us. But perhaps we can carry it better here, where we are not drowning in it." 3 weeks later, Anna stood in Captain Morrison's office holding the completed residency application. Her hands did not shake as she signed her name at the bottom. This was not surrender. This was choice. The captain reviewed the documents with professional efficiency, then looked up at her with something like kindness in his eyes. "Miss Bauer, I want you to know that this program exists because of people like you, German civilians who were caught in circumstances beyond their control, who deserve a second chance. I am grateful for the opportunity. The gratitude should be mutual." Morrison stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to America, officially this time." Anna shook his hand, feeling the weight of that gesture. Enemy and citizen, prisoner and free woman, all of it contained in a simple clasp of hands across a desk in Texas. The repatriation ship left from Galveston 6 weeks later. Anna, Margaret, and Clara stood on the dock, watching other women board women who had made different choices, who were returning to whatever remained of home. Frau Schmidt was among them. She embraced each of the Bauers in turn, her eyes wet with tears. "I must go back. My husband's grave is in Hamburg. I cannot leave him alone." "He would understand," Margaret said. "Perhaps, but I would not." Frau Schmidt picked up her small suitcase. "Be happy here. Build good lives. And remember us sometimes." "Always," Anna promised. They watched the ship until it disappeared over the horizon, carrying 60 women and children back across an ocean toward an uncertain future. Then they turned and walked back to the camp that was becoming home. The years that followed were not easy. Learning to truly belong in a country that had imprisoned you required constant navigation between gratitude and grief, between moving forward and remembering where you came from. But Anna discovered that difficulty was not the same as impossibility. She enrolled at the University of Texas in Austin, studying journalism with a focus that bordered on obsession. She wrote about the camps, both the death camps in Europe and the internment camps in America. She wrote about fear and propaganda and the human capacity for both cruelty and kindness. She wrote until her fingers cramped and her eyes blurred, driven by her father's words to be a witness to make sure the world remembered. Heinrich was released from Camp Kennedy in late 1947 and joined his family in Texas. He was thinner than Anna remembered, gray-haired, and somehow smaller, as if grief had compressed him. But he was alive. And slowly in the Texas sun, surrounded by daughters who had learned to thrive, he began to heal. He never spoke about what he had seen in the photographs from the camps. But he worked with Anna on her articles, providing historical context and diplomatic insight, helping her understand how good people could be swept into monstrous systems. Their collaboration became a kind of therapy for them both. Chief Webb retired from military service in 1948 and opened a restaurant in Austin. He called it Oma's Kitchen in honor of his Bavarian grandmother and the German women who had taught him their secrets. Margaret worked there part-time, running the pastry section and teaching young cooks the old ways. The restaurant became a gathering place for German immigrants and American veterans, a neutral space where former enemies could share meals and stories in the slow reconciliation that comes from breaking bread together. The walls were covered with photographs, including one of Margaret and Chief standing in the Camp Swift kitchen, both of them flour-dusted and grinning. Private Daniel Reyes left the Army in 1949 and returned to San Antonio to run his grandfather's ranch. He and Anna maintained a friendship through letters and occasional visits, a connection built on tomato plants and honest conversation. He married in 1951, and Anna attended the wedding, bringing Clara, who had developed a significant crush on Reyes's younger brother. Clara herself flourished in ways that seemed almost miraculous. She graduated from high school in 1950, top of her class, and went on to study medicine at the University of Texas. The frightened 14-year-old who had arrived at Camp Swift transformed into a confident, young woman who believed she could heal the world one patient at a time. "I want to work with refugees," she told Anna over coffee one afternoon in 1953. "People displaced by war. I want to give them the kind of care we received. Medical treatment without judgment. Dignity without conditions." Anna looked at her sister now, 21 and radiant with purpose, and felt pride so fierce it was almost painful. "You will be extraordinary at it." "I learned from extraordinary teachers," Clara said simply. By 1955, Anna had established herself as a journalist of some reputation. Her series on post-war displacement won awards and brought attention to the thousands still living in limbo across Europe. Editors sought her perspective on refugee crises and cultural integration and the long shadows cast by war. But the story she had not yet written was the one closest to her heart. The story of Camp Swift and what happened there. The story of breakfast and generators and piano music. The story of enemies learning to see each other as human. She had tried several times over the years, but the words never felt adequate. How do you capture the moment when fear transforms into trust? How do you explain the revolution that happens when someone hands you bacon and expects nothing in return? The answer came in 1958 when Chief Webb called to tell her that Captain Morrison had died. Anna attended the funeral in Austin, standing beside Margaret and Clara and Chief and dozens of veterans who had served under Morrison. The eulogies spoke of his military service, his leadership, his dedication to duty. But Anna knew the truth. The most important thing William Morrison had ever done was decide that German women deserved hot showers and decent food and electric lights during storms. That choice had saved lives. Not dramatically, not in ways that would make headlines, but quietly and completely. It had saved Margaret from poisoning her daughters. It had saved Anna from living in fear forever. It had saved Clara from growing up believing that cruelty was the natural order of things. After the funeral, Anna went home and began to write. Not an article this time, but a book. The full story from the cellar in Boston to the cottage in Texas, from the silver spoon hidden in her pocket to the moment her mother poured poison down a drain. She wrote for 6 months, working late into the night, driven by the need to capture not just what happened, but what it meant. That kindness in wartime was not weakness, but the highest form of strength. That treating enemies with dignity did not dishonor the dead, but honored them by proving you were better than the worst things done in their name. She sent the manuscript to her father first. Heinrich read it in a single sitting, then called her from the restaurant payphone, his voice thick with emotion. "You have done it," he said. "You have told the truth, not the comfortable truth or the simple truth, but the complicated, painful, necessary truth. Will anyone want to read it? Everyone needs to read it." Heinrich's conviction was absolute. America needs to remember that its greatness lies not in military might, but in moments like Camp Swift. And Germany needs to remember that the path back from evil begins with witnesses willing to speak. The book was published in 1959 under the title The Silver Spoon and Enemy Aliens Story of American Kindness. Reviews were mixed. Some called it naive, others propaganda, still others a whitewashing of America's own internment sins. But the letters poured in, from veterans who had guarded civilian camps and never spoke about it, from German immigrants who recognized their own experiences in Anna's words, from young people trying to understand how their parents' generation had survived such darkness and emerged capable of building anything at all. One letter came from a woman in California. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she had been interned at Manzanar during the war, one of thousands of Japanese Americans imprisoned by their own government. "I read your book in one sitting," Sarah wrote, "and I wept not from sadness, but from recognition. You had Chief Webb. I had Mrs. Patterson, the white teacher, who insisted on running proper classes behind the barbed wire. You had Captain Morrison. I had Lieutenant Foster, who made sure we had Christmas presents and Halloween candy. We need these stories, Sarah continued, not to excuse what was done to us, but to remember that even in the darkest times, some people chose light. That choice matters. It gives us something to build on. Anna kept that letter in her desk drawer, reading it whenever she doubted whether telling her story had been worth the vulnerability it required. In 1965, 10 years after the book's publication, the University of Texas invited Anna to give a lecture series on journalism and witness testimony. She stood before a lecture hall full of students, most of them born after the war, and tried to explain what it meant to live through history and survive it. The silver spoon my grandmother gave me survived bombing and displacement and 4 years of internment. She told them, holding up the tarnished spoon that still lived in her desk drawer, but it survived only because I kept using it, kept polishing it, kept remembering what it represented. She set the spoon on the podium where everyone could see it. Memory is the same way. If we hide our difficult stories, if we let shame or fear or the desire to move on cause us to forget those stories tarnish, they become useless. But if we use them, if we polish them through repeated telling, they stay bright. They teach us. They warn us. They guide us. A student raised her hand. But how do you tell a story without revenge, without making it about villains and heroes? By telling the truth, Anna said simply. The Americans who ran Camp Swift were not saints. They were ordinary men doing their jobs in a complicated time. Some were kind, some were indifferent, some were probably cruel when I was not looking. But the system they created chose dignity over degradation. That choice mattered more than individual virtue or vice. And the Germans, another student asked, how do you write about your own people after what they did? Anna was quiet for a moment thinking, with honesty and grief and the determination to be better. My father taught me that acknowledging evil is not the same as accepting it. We can say our people did monstrous things and still claim our humanity. The two exist together. They must exist together or we learn nothing. The lecture ended with a standing ovation that Anna felt she did not deserve. But afterwards, students lined up to talk to her, to share their own family stories of war and displacement, and the complicated work of building lives on broken foundations. One young man waited until the end. He was in his early 20s, dark-haired and serious with eyes that held an old soul's weight. Miss Bauer, my name is Michael Morrison. My grandfather was Captain William Morrison. Anna's breath caught. I'm so sorry for your loss. Your grandfather was a good man. I know, but I did not really understand why until I read your book. Michael pulled a worn paperback from his bag. Anna's book spine cracked from multiple readings pages, flagged with dozens of bookmarks. My grandfather never talked about Camp Swift. He deflected whenever we asked, said it was not important, just administrative work. He was humble. What he did was everything. That is what I am beginning to understand. Michael opened the book to a flagged page. You wrote that the measure of a man is what he does when no one is watching, that power reveals character not by how it is claimed, but by how it is exercised. Your grandfather taught me that. He tried to teach me too, but I was too young to understand. Michael's eyes were bright with unshed tears. He died when I was 12, but your book has given me a way to know him, to understand what mattered to him, and I want to thank you for that. They talked for an hour, Anna sharing memories of the captain that she had not included in the book. Small moments of kindness and dry humor, and the quiet authority of a man who led by example rather than command. Michael absorbed every detail like someone assembling a puzzle, building a picture of the grandfather he had lost too soon. What will you do with this knowledge? Anna asked finally. I am not sure yet, but I know I want to live in a way that would make him proud, that honors what he believed. Michael closed the book carefully. Thank you for remembering him, for remembering all of them. After he left, Anna sat alone in the empty lecture hall holding the silver spoon and thinking about the strange geometry of legacy. How kindness extended across decades through stories and memory, and the willingness of each generation to learn from the one before. The spoon caught the afternoon light and held it proof that beauty and utility could coexist, that the past could illuminate the present if you kept it polished, invisible, and useful. In 1970, Anna received a letter from Private Reyes, now a grandfather himself. His eldest granddaughter was studying journalism at UT Austin. Would Anna consider mentoring her? Anna said yes immediately. Maria Reyes was 20 and fierce and determined to write about immigration and border communities and the people caught between cultures. She reminded Anna of herself at that age, burning with the need to witness and document and explain. They met weekly in coffee shops and libraries, Anna sharing the craft she had learned over decades while Maria shared perspectives that Anna's generation had missed. The world was changing. Stories that had been silenced were finally being heard. And young journalists like Maria were making sure those stories were told with complexity and compassion. My grandfather talks about you sometimes, Maria said one afternoon, about the garden at Camp Swift. He says you taught him to see beyond uniforms. He taught me the same thing. He also said you kept a silver spoon from Germany. Is that true? Anna pulled a spoon from her purse. She carried it everywhere now, a talisman and a teaching tool. My grandmother gave it to me when I was 17. I have kept it for 53 years. Maria examined the spoon, running her finger over the engraved crest. Why? Because it reminds me where I came from, and because silver does not tarnish if you use it. My grandfather said something similar about stories. Anna smiled. Your grandfather is a wise man. They talked about legacy and memory, and the responsibility of those who survived to speak for those who did not. Maria took notes in a small journal, her handwriting quick and confident, and Anna saw the future taking shape in that young woman's hands. In 1975, 30 years after her arrival at Camp Swift, Anna donated her papers to the University of Texas Archives. Letters and photographs and manuscripts. The original draft of her book covered in her father's editorial marks. Recipes from Margaret's collaboration with Chief Webb. Even the silver spoon, though, that took longer to release. Are you certain? The archivist asked. Family heirlooms are precious. Which is why they should be shared, Anna replied. My grandmother gave me this spoon so I would remember I was loved. Now it can remind others that they are part of something larger than themselves. That history lives in objects, in stories, and the choices we make about what to preserve. She kept the spoon one more week, holding it each night before bed, saying goodbye to the weight it had carried for so long. Then she placed it in a velvet-lined box and delivered it to the archive, where it would be cataloged and displayed and studied by students trying to understand their complicated inheritance. Heinrich Bauer died peacefully in 1976 at the age of 78. His funeral was held at the Lutheran Church in Austin, attended by family and colleagues, and a surprising number of former Camp Swift residents who had made Texas their home. Anna delivered the eulogy, speaking about her father's journey from diplomat to prisoner to witness. She talked about his courage in acknowledging Germany's sins and his wisdom in seeing that the path forward required not forgetting, but remembering in ways that led to growth rather than paralysis. He taught me that being German and being good were not mutually exclusive, Anna said, that we could face our history without being destroyed by it. That redemption was possible through honest reckoning and determined change. After the service, Margaret sat in the church pew staring at the altar where her husband's casket had rested. She was 83 now, white-haired and frail, but her eyes were clear. I will see him soon, she said matter-of-factly. Anna took her mother's hand. Not too soon, I hope. Soon enough. Margaret's smile was peaceful. We had 47 years together, 30 of them, in this strange country that became home. That is more than many people get. Do you have any regrets? Margaret considered the question seriously. I regret that I carried poison for so long. I regret the nights your sister spent afraid because of my fear. But I do not regret staying. Texas gave us something Germany could not. A chance to be new people without denying who we were. Margaret Bauer died 8 months later in her sleep in the small house she had shared with Heinrich for 3 decades. Her last words spoken to Anna the evening before were in English with a Texas accent. Tell Chief I will save him a seat in heaven. We have recipes to perfect. The funeral drew an even larger crowd than Heinrich's. Chief Webb was too ill to attend, but he sent flowers and a note that made Anna cry. Your mama taught me that kindness has no language barrier. She will be missed. Chief himself died in 1978, and Anna spoke at his funeral too. This man who had fed her bacon and taught her that American kindness was not propaganda, but practice. She told stories that made the mourners laugh and cry, and she made sure everyone understood that Marcus Webb had been more than a cook. He had been a bridge builder, a teacher, a man who understood that the simplest acts could have the most profound consequences. Clara followed in 1995, her death sudden and unexpected at 63. She had spent her career working with refugee populations, bringing medical care and dignity to people displaced by wars in Vietnam, Bosnia, Rwanda. She died doing what she loved, treating patients in a field hospital in Kosovo. At Clara's memorial service, dozens of former patients spoke about Dr. Bauer, who had treated them not as victims, but as human beings deserving of the best care she could provide, who had learned their names and their stories, who had seen them. My sister learned that at Camp Swift, Anna told the gathering. She was 14 when we arrived, convinced we would be destroyed. Instead, she was shown that even enemies deserve dignity. That lesson shaped everything she did afterward. Anna outlived them all. Margaret and Heinrich Chief and Captain Morrison, even Private Reyes, who died in 2001 at 83. She attended funerals and wrote obituaries and watched the world change in ways both heartening and horrifying. She lived to see the Berlin Wall fall and Germany reunify. She lived to see new wars create new refugees. She lived to see her book go out of print, then back into print, then assigned in college courses about World War II, in memory and reconciliation. And she lived to see her silver spoon displayed in the university archive become a teaching tool for students learning about the human cost of war and the human capacity for recovery. On her 90th birthday in 2011, the university held a celebration in her honor. The lecture hall overflowed with former students and colleagues and people whose lives she had touched through her writing. Maria Reyes, now a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist herself, gave the keynote address. She spoke about Anna's mentorship and the importance of witness testimony and the responsibility each generation has to learn from the one before. Miss Bauer taught me that stories are not just about what happened, but about what we choose to do with what happened, Maria said. She could have spent her life bitter about imprisonment. Instead, she spent it grateful for the kindness that saved her. That choice made all the difference. Anna sat in the front row, overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection and respect. When Maria finished, the audience stood and applauded for 5 full minutes. Afterward, a young woman approached Anna. She was maybe 25, blonde and blue-eyed, with an earnest expression that reminded Anna of her younger self. Miss Bauer, my name is Rachel Morrison. I am Captain William Morrison's great-granddaughter. Anna's breath caught. Michael's daughter. Yes, my father told me to find you. He said you knew my great-grandfather better than anyone. Rachel pulled out a notebook. I am writing my dissertation on American internment camps during World War II. Would you be willing to talk to me? To tell me about Camp Swift? Anna looked at this young woman, 4th generation, removed from the captain, but carrying his legacy forward through scholarship and curiosity. She thought about silver spoons and how they stay bright through use. She thought about stories and how they remain vital through retelling. I would be honored, Anna said. They met weekly for 6 months. Anna shared every memory she could summon, every detail about the captain and Chief Webb and Private Reyes and all the ordinary men who had chosen extraordinary decency. Rachel recorded it all, asking questions that pushed Anna to remember things she had forgotten, to articulate things she had felt but never expressed. The resulting dissertation, Kindness as Resistance, Civilian Internment, and Human Dignity at Camp Swift 1945 to 1947, won awards and became the basis for Rachel's first book. Anna read it with tears streaming down her face, grateful that the story would live on through this young scholar's careful work. Anna Bauer died peacefully on a spring morning in 2013 at the age of 92. She was in her apartment in Austin, surrounded by books and photographs and the accumulated evidence of a life well lived. On her bedside table sat a letter she had been writing to a former student. The last lines she wrote were these: remember that the measure of a society is not how it treats its friends, but how it treats those who cannot fight back. We had a choice at Camp Swift. We could have been destroyed by fear or saved by kindness. That we were saved was not luck. It was the deliberate choice of men who understood that strength and compassion are not opposites, but partners. Her funeral was attended by hundreds, journalists and refugees, academics and activists, people whose lives she had touched directly, and people who knew her only through her work. Rachel Morrison gave the eulogy, speaking about Anna's legacy of witness and remembrance. She held up a photograph of the silver spoon from the archive and explained its significance. This spoon survived a war because Anna Bauer kept using it, Rachel said. She could have hidden it away to preserve it. Instead, she used it every day, polishing it through repetition until it gleamed. That is what she did with her story too. She used it. She polished it through repeated telling. She made sure it stayed bright and useful and present. Rachel paused, looking out at the crowded church. Now that work falls to us, to remember Camp Swift and Captain Morrison and Chief Webb and all the ordinary people who chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier, to tell their stories, to learn from their example, to keep the silver bright. In the years that followed, Camp Swift would be remembered not as a prison, but as a laboratory for human decency. The site became a memorial and educational center, teaching new generations about the complicated history of American internment and the possibility of choosing dignity over degradation. The silver spoon remained on display, a small object carrying enormous weight. Students would stand before it reading Anna's story, learning that survival is not enough, that how we survive matters as much as whether we survive. And on quiet afternoons when the memorial was empty, the spoon would catch the Texas sunlight and hold it, throwing fractured rainbows across polished floors. Proof that beauty persists, that kindness matters, that the choices we make in dark times echo across generations, teaching those who come after us that even in the worst moments, we can choose light over darkness, humanity over hatred, silver spoons over poison. The legacy lived on.